back. I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. Today we're doing a combined discussion and a bit of a case study about having unpleasant conversations at work. So these are the conversations that are about performance, where performance is not up to the expected level, about downsizing in organisations, anything that is, it might be expected or anticipated, but it's not a pleasant conversation. It's not one that you want to have. It's one that you'll put off doing unless you absolutely have to do it, and probably put off until the last minute when you have to do it. And I want to talk with Fulyana about how you prepare for these conversations and then how you give yourself time to recover afterwards. We have talked very briefly about it in some of the other case studies, particularly where we've been looking at managing yourself, managing you as a manager. So on this occasion we want to really focus down and make sure that we have given you the benefit of all of our experience in having these unpleasant conversations. So if we look first of all at, we might do it case study style basis so that it's nice and relevant for those of you who are listening, that we've come into the period of performance review. We've used the system that we always use, so we've had a peer review, we've had a self-review, we've had a manager review, and all of the indications are that there, even in the self-review, is that there are areas that require significant improvement. We're not talking about a little bit of improvement, we're not talking about doing better next time, we're talking about a significant improvement in a particular area. Let's say we'll make it something that's hard to quantify in terms of business performance. We'll say that there's too much office socialising happens. That's been identified at each of the levels. The peer review has identified it. The person individually has identified that they spend a lot of time socialising in the office. They haven't necessarily said it's not a good thing, but they've identified that that's something that they do. And manager has also identified that it's something that they do.
And the reason it's an issue, it's because their productivity is down and they're disrupting other people, yeah?
We'll say they're disrupting. It is being perceived as a disruption. We won't say that the productivity has been affected.
Okay, the first thing I think is that when you go into those difficult conversations, generally speaking, go there being constructive rather than saying, this is a difficult conversation, it's going to be unpleasant, I hate it. Be prepared, but don't be over-scripted, simply because you want to really listen, but be clear on the outcome. So don't be at the end of it, be sure that you're going to have the communication made and received both ways, and that you've got a plan or an action outcome out of it, whatever that is. So if I look at the situation that we just described, this scenario is that person come in and say, right, we already had made an appointment beforehand, right? You know, you come in and then say, well, thanks for coming in. You know what this meeting is about, but let me just be sure. So we're here to discuss your over-socializing in the office. Don't mince your words, say it and be clear. Just say, what I like to do with this conversation is talk about, we discussed it before, I want to go over it again, is why you agreed with me before that it is an issue, and now we're at the point that it's still continuing to be an issue. So today we're going to come to a specific action plan about how we're going to change this.
The response you get is that, yes, I can see that some people see that it's a problem, but I think it's good for all of these reasons. That response is the reason that Fulyana is saying is you have to be ready to listen, because you're talking to someone who is going to be on edge about what you've got to say, defensive about their performance because they're worried about their position and about how people are perceiving them. So it's a personal thing for them, and for you it's a work thing. So you've got to make sure that you understand that the communication that's happening is all about the performance at work. It's not a personal issue. And there are some cases where I've actually had to stop the conversation and say, this is not about you as a person. This is about what you are doing, the work you are performing, and how the work performance is perceived and is affecting others it's not about you. And I've had to say it half a dozen times to actually get that message through, because it's very hard for us when we're hearing it to not feel that it is about us and that you're going to hate me because I'm doing these things wrong. And it is simply not about the individual person, it is about the work performance, and that has to be so very clear before you continue the conversation. Otherwise it just becomes more unpleasant, and neither side hears what is being said, and you don't get, even though you might come to some agreed action plan, you don't get to a point where there is commitment to that action plan.
If you look at that same example, person come in and you say to them, I always like to make the heading clear, that's what this is the topic. And then you say, could you please tell me why do you do it?
Yeah.
And normally that will give me an insight. I'm going to take a person who is difficult and they would normally make things embellish and make them worse. So the answer could be, which some of you might relate to, is say, well, I don't know why you are making it an issue, boss, because as a matter of fact, I'm doing exactly, you're confusing me, because I'm doing exactly what we agreed should be our values and behaviours. We agreed.
Or worse, I'm doing exactly what you do.
Yeah.
I'm just following your example.
Now, I'll leave that for another point, but for this point, it's more about we're supposed to work as a team, we're supposed to be good atmosphere at work, and we should have fun as well as do work. I'm doing all of these, which is in our values and agreed behaviours, and now you're pulling me up on that. So the answer to that is, oh, thank you for sharing that. I now do understand what your motivation is, and that's a good one. Now, to do that, we need to do it just a little bit in more structured way, in a way that we can do it so that, yes, there's some natural things like in weekend saying hi, how was your weekend is one thing, but 3-4 times a day walking the floor saying hello. And I also have to say, I'll be saying something on the lines, I want to continue to acknowledge that your work performance is really good and it continues to be good. So you obviously are able to do your job well as socialize. Maybe you and I need to think about how we can achieve both objectives. One is you want to be a major player in our values and behaviour about teamwork and fun, right? And the person said, yes. Okay, so maybe we need to think about how we can come up with some social interaction activities. Do we have a social club? Do you want to participate in that? We don't have a social club. Would you like to chair a committee to pick people from different areas and talk about how we do that? See, this way, during the day, during the hours, you still can do that. So again, make them do what they like to do, but in the right way and for the right reasons. Or at the end of the day too, it might be there is another issue, and I wouldn't tackle it at the same time because it will only cause trouble, nothing, is maybe the person hasn't got enough to do. You need to think about that, and that might be irritating others because they have got a lot to do and this person seems like they're having a great picnic.
Yeah.
So listen, see where they're coming from, find a solution if possible that will get the best out of both what's needed for the organisation and the individual, but never ever be afraid to call it if it's disruptive and it's none of that. And the person, you need to do your job as a manager, but you do it constructively, respectfully and firmly.
Okay, we might move on now to the other example that we wanted to talk about, and that's about downsizing. And in the downsizing area, I want to explore two scenarios. The first one is that the downsizing activity has been determined, and it's now your job to tell the person who has worked in the area for the longest, is the perceived patriarch, matriarch of the area, that they're going to be the first one to go.
I think with that one, it does happen sadly, and for those of you who have been recipient or deliverer of that, it's just as hard on both sides of the table. But when you are delivering that, never ever tell them how hard it is for you, because it's not about you.
No.
And you've got a job to do. And understand that even if that person has been walking around saying, oh, I wish they give me a redundancy, I would love to have a job, I've been here and they'll give me, it's still a shock at the end of the day. Thinking and wishing and actually happening is two different things.
Their first reaction is, why me?
Yeah.
Even if they know why, and even if they've been part of the process that is going to result in the downsizing, and they understand why and they appreciate why, the automatic reaction is, why me? And you don't have to address that. You don't have to answer that in this situation. You merely have to provide them with the formal notification that this is the decision that has been made, and then what the benefits are, what the process is. And that's probably the most important thing, is what is the process from this point on? What is it that the organisation is going to do for them? How long have these people got? Have they got options about what they can do at this point in time? All of those things, all of the forward planning, the moving forward, but don't rush through it. Don't make it sound as though, well, here it is, and the verbal diarrhea, make a decision now, or you don't have to make a decision now, take it home and think about it, and just bombard them with information without giving them the opportunity to adjust to the situation that they're faced with.
In relation with why me, if there is a reason and you know it, for example, they work in Division X and we're outsourcing that work to another country or whatever, then we can. But if it
Except
is
that
one
you might draw them into an argument about whether that was the right decision or not.
Yeah, and on that, that's another conversation altogether. Even if you didn't agree with it, and if they said to you, but boss, you don't agree with that yourself, I know your views on that, I think you still got to hold the company line and say, this is the decision was made, communicate whatever was at the management level agreed to communicate, and stick to that line. And then with the person, agree, Kim, that you've got to keep knowing they're not listening. I mean, they're doing their best to listen, but it's emotional.
They're not hearing
it. And they're feeling it. Also, things that start going through people's head from my experiences about what me, or what am I going to do now? Oh, I'm in the process of buying a car, and I'm in the process of buying a house. Well, can it be another 6 months? Can it be, all these things? And that's why they can't hear you properly.
And I think the other thing that we heard in Nick Plummer's interview with us, his individual interview, which was some time ago now, he talked about the biggest single issue that he found when he was doing the outplacements for organisations was that they worried about how they were going to tell people at home, and more importantly, how they were going to tell the neighbours.
Yes.
Because the neighbours, in some cases, in this sort of instance, would see them at home more often than not. Yes. And it was a situation that he had been through himself. And he was surprised at the response that he got, at what he had anticipated the reactions being, particularly with the neighbours, were not the reactions that he got. And in fact, there was a lot more understanding than he was expecting to find.
Yes. But going back to what happens now, that is the most important, you're right, in the sense that you then say, all right, I'm going to go through the process, but also you're going to be talking to someone from HR, and then there is an outplacement process and all of that. What you have to be very, very clear about, I'm going to walk you through it, but I know that it's a big issue and I'm not trying to soften it and I'm not trying to rush it. I would like you to think about it. It's all documented. And we can do two things. If you prefer to go home and think about it and we talk tomorrow, that's fine. If you want to talk to HR now, I've got someone ready. If you want to talk to the outplacement now, I've got someone ready. However, I would like you to go through and choose. There is no rush. You don't have to be rushed out the door now. And you're going to have a lot more questions. So I'll always be here to answer your questions, either myself or the right area. Go through that and then have other conversations. And then again, just say, I'm happy to go over this about 10 times because I know it is a lot to take in. And then talk about things like, once we get to the next stage, I can answer questions pertaining to that one. If you don't want to do it in chunks, we can. For example, what happened at the end of that? When do I get paid? What do I get paid? What's my entitlement? What about you and me? Okay, I know the process and I'll go through HR with that. What about you? Are you going to give me a referee? Are you not happy with my performance? I know you always said you were, but why am I on the list? Why couldn't you put me in another area? And then at that point, you should have already said, you know, the process is that this area no longer exists, so your position is redundant, not you, your position is redundant. However, the first thing is to look for other positions within the organisation. You should have already said that, but then you repeat it because they haven't heard it.
Yeah.
And then you just go through it. Care, sensitivity, absolute clarity, and going over the process and give them time for it to sink in, have the right people to support you. Some people can get very angry and hurt and all of that, and they might need somebody from like employee assistance program. We often had that on hand in different organizations I worked in, so that if they want someone, they can talk to someone totally independent, and it's about emotional things or financials or that sort of thing.
All right, so we go to the other end of the scale, and you're downsizing again, but the person going this time is the newest member of the team, and this is a person who has come in bright, starry-eyed, starting their career. This is their first job, and they've been here less than 12 months, let's say, and it's time for them to go.
Now, I'm going to take a position with this person being very upbeat and going on, all of these things happen. I've just been made redundant from the other organisation. This is my second one. So in the space of 6 months, it's no problem. Don't worry about it. I know exactly. It's okay. Please don't just buy that, because that person is hurting. They just changed jobs. They gave up probably, well, in this case, the person is saying, I was made redundant and made redundant again. They've just been through the full emotional cycle of the whole thing. When they say, I'm okay, don't pretend they're not okay, but don't just say, oh, good, phew, I'm happy, go away. Don't. Still do exactly the same as we said before, because you need to listen to them, you need to repeat, you need them to absorb it. Because in this particular case, that person will be even more worried because they haven't been there long enough, and there's not much in a payout. Usually it's the statutory amount. So again, you need to...
And they haven't established themselves. They don't know their self-worth. There's a few other issues that are as difficult to address at the other end of the scale.
And even if they are taking it well, still be the same thing. Be sensitive, be thoughtful, give them the support and the information they need. I think in that situation, often people say, I know you only known me for X months. How was I going? We haven't had the chance, or you only touched on it. Then tell them. But if they haven't been performing, I don't think it's the time to tell them, and you should have told them before anyway.
Yes.
But in this particular case, the chances are it's too early to tell. And therefore, you need to tell them what you saw honestly as the good things. Honestly, not made up.
I think that probably covers it. We don't want to go into too much detail. It is a very much a situation by situation management issue, but we've given you some ideas and some ways of thinking about dealing with it. I do want to remind you though that you need to prepare beforehand, and you need to give yourself time to recover after every time you have one of those conversations. And that might be that you simply go on to another task. You don't do them back to back through the afternoon. And in saying that, when you're planning for this activity to happen, you have to plan that they don't fall back to back, and that if that means that you've got to do it over 2 days or 20 days, that's what happens. So people will know that's what's happening, but they'll always still be more interested in their individual session with you than the actual timing of when it happens. Give yourself time to plan, time to recover, and that might be in the office, it might be going for a walk outside, it might be stopping and listening to some meditation or some music or something else that takes you out of that moment into something else, so that you can then gear up for the next one, so that you are focused on each interaction individually. That's it. We've given you some things to think about, As always, if you've got some experiences that you'd like to share with us or some other topics that you would like us to cover, please drop us a line. We're always glad to hear from you. I'm Kimberly Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.